Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's episode. Today we are working with a Tikka T3x. Appears to be a stainless steel action. Got this from a customer to do a full accurizing, and we're going to install a recoil lug. So you'll see that recoil lug there on the bench by the bolt. We're going to machine off that funky taper Tikka puts in there and put in a true recoil lug that nicely matches the angles on the front. One portion of this is figuring out the bolt bore raceway diameter, and as you can see, the bolt slips through there, so we got to figure out the two diameters. Well, I've had a couple bushings specially made for the Tikka because they are a little bit smaller in diameter. We're in the, here's one of them, 696 5/10. So that's 6.965 in thousandths of an inch. And so you can see it fits nicely in the back there. And then the front one will be the 6.975. So we've got a difference of 1/1000th of an inch between the two front and rear bolt bearing surfaces. Not excessive. So we're installing the front bolt raceway bushing to prepare for our indicating mandrel to get this thing centered up in the lathe, both axially and radially. And you can see they are a nice snug semi-press fit. They are not falling out loose, and they are not so tight that you have to force them in there or nothing, but putting in that indicating mandrel, and we just use this to, like I said, align the thing axially and radially. The customer did not want sleeves on the bolt for some reason. Not real sure why. I didn't get into it with him. He just said don't sleeve the bolt, so I didn't sleeve the bolt. But again, as you can see, nothing's falling out loose. All right, here it is installed in the Action blueprinting jig. It's my homemade, based off the Grattan and the Viper. It's typical Action blueprinting jig. Really nothing fancy about it or special. Here we are installed into the lathe, and we're starting to get this thing dialed in. I've got my Mitutoyo 1/10,000th of an inch dial test indicator installed. Finally got a new one. If you guys are subscribers, you've probably seen older videos with that poopy tossed with the rigged probes on it. Not the best way to go about that. And it measures accurately and everything, but I really like this Mitutoyo. It's very good for getting inside the barrel chambers as well. But anyway, we're aligning this thing. So here comes the axial alignment. This will be on the far end of the rod. So you can't really see it, but I'm adjusting the rear screws of the jig to get this thing lined up. And got that way better. So each adjustment affects the previous one. So we're just going to go back and forth here and align this thing. So this will be the radial adjustment here. And go back to the axial, and you'll see how that's been thrown way out again. So we're just aligning the center line of this receiver to run perfectly true, both radially and axially. So this is taking out the round, aligning it round, basically, in the jig, in the lathe. And the outboard adjustment is aligning it radially. So think of a cone. We're taking out the conical kind of misalignment. And you can see we're getting closer and closer each time. And I'm just showing there's up and down play, kind of getting it more towards 0 just for visual effect. Really doesn't matter which number it's on as long as the needle is not moving. And so now our radial adjustment is almost perfect. I'm going to start snugging up those screws with the wrench now. Just getting everything locked in. And the nice thing about this Tikka is it's got flats on each side, so we're not bearing down on a cylinder like a Remington 700 or something. So it gives us a lot more purchase, and so we don't have to go quite as tight, but it also lessens the chance of anything slipping during the machining operations. And now our radial adjustment is getting extremely close. So I'll just go around with the wrench and snug it up into alignment. And this is going to be chambered in a 280 Ackley Improved. Okay, here we are showing the final alignment within 1/10,000th of an inch. Maybe some very minute adjustments here to get this thing running perfect. But just like we do with all the Remingtons and all the other actions that you may have seen. Now we're going to test some run out here. So we're touching off on the relief cut in the front. And it looking like 1, 2, 3, 4 thousandths or so. About 4 thousandths of run out there, and it's pretty swinging pretty erratic there. So that's telling us the features of the action there are not cut perfectly true with the center line. So now we're coming in and testing the threads. So I've got the machine engaged on the half nut, so we're following that thread all the way in. And it's looking like about the same, 4 thousandths give or take. So not terribly crazy. I've seen way worse than this, but certainly not perfect. And that's what we like to do here is perfectly square up actions as part of our accurizing service. So we're going to get this thing running, well, it's running true now, but we're going to get this thing squared up, basically true. True it all up by cutting these surfaces, recutting them in their newly aligned state. Factories do not have the time or patience to do this to each one. That's why they charge a lot less, for these actions. They're really good actions, perfectly good, but they're going to be lacking in some of the straightness and trueness that you'd find in a higher dollar, Defiance or Mac Brothers or Bat Machine or Stiller, stuff like that. You would expect those to be good. Now we're going in here and cleaning up the face. This is going to be quite a process here because we're cutting all the way down underneath. We're going to cut out that taper, essentially. For some reason, Tikka thought it'd be a really good idea to put a silly taper on the front and eliminate any sort of true recoil lug. Probably cost savings measure on their end for manufacturing, but we are going to put that. I'm sorry I didn't show it very closely, but there's a very high quality recoil lug made by Long Rifles Incorporated that we're going to install in this new rifle rebirth, as it were. So we're just going in there, facing this thing off, taking 10 thousandths per pass, nothing crazy. I don't want to hog off material. I don't want to shift anything out. Took all that time aligning this thing, so there we got the tool repositioned so I can reach in there just a little bit further. So just getting close to having a perfectly flat face or a torque shoulder for the barrel. And it's going to eliminate that taper, which is going to make the recoil lug and barrel transition real nice. It's going to make it look clean and good. You'll see that a little later when everything's put together. Okay, so there you can see the receiver now is flat. There's no more taper. Maybe just a hint of some burrs being pushed out there, but the taper's completely gone. Now I'm going to go in for one final, very light finishing pass. Just to get this torque shoulder, very important aspect of the receiver, machined perfectly flat and true. And there we go. That operation is done. Next we're going to go in there and cut the threads. Recut the threads. Now, I'm not going to put a relief in the front like it originally had because of the recoil lug. Just like a Remington 700 or any action with a separate recoil lug, you don't need that because the lug is taking up a bunch of space on the barrel shank. And you basically thread just a touch under the lug, so there's no need for a new relief cut in the front of the receiver there. And so this is a 16 thread per inch. 1 inch diameter originally. And we're going to increase that obviously because we're going to be cutting out that 4/1000th of an inch plus or minus total indicator run out. Truing up everything. So we're going to cut under all that and cut past the 4/1000ths and just a complete cleanup with the thread there. So I've edited this a little bit short. This is not sped up, but it's definitely not, you're not going to see each and every pass here. Just because it's going to be extremely boring. I don't know, some of you might enjoy watching this, but no need to see the entire process. That would take up a good hour of time. So you can see progressively the threads are starting to get shinier and shinier every time the tool emerges. And yes, I'm threading in reverse, kind of backwards, because much easier to do it this way. Cleaner, no risk of crashing. And I've done this for nearly a decade now with absolutely no problems. So what I do is just cut a little relief in the back, just like a true blind internal thread. So I'll cut a relief in the back for the tool to have a place to start. And it's basically just the width of the 60-degree point, just so it's not sitting there idle. So it's got some free space. So we're just cutting that out. Like I said, it's 16 threads per inch, just like a Remington 700 and some Winchester 70s. The Sockos, a lot of other stuff. 16s are just a very common thread for a receiver and barrel tenon. And so you see the nice chips there. There's certainly no stress, no heat being generated. Very clean, light passes. I take pretty much 1/1000th per pass here, maybe 2. No more than that. As we cut deeper and deeper, essentially cutting out the run out and squaring up, truing up those threads. And there's a pretty significant pass. So the deeper you get, the more you're getting, more material you're cutting out. And that insert is a partial profile. So as it approaches the valley, the final depth, it's actually slightly shaving off the crests of the thread. Just makes life easier and makes it look nicer, and no sharp edges on the, it puts the proper radius basically on the crests. Run the machine, somewhere around 400 to 500 RPM. So considerably fast, but doing it in reverse this way, I can run it nice and fast like that and not crash anything. And so there you go. Look at that. Some pretty nice fresh steel there. No more schmutz in the threads. It's all cleaned out. obviously deeper now. We usually end up around 1 inch 40 thousandths when we finally get all the way down to cleaned up. Take about 40 out. Now we're going to do a few finishing passes with some thick, high sulfur content oil. That's some viper's venom actually there. Like that stuff for chambering and threading. You know, I don't use it till close to the end. I wasn't using it much in this video just to show. So oil's not splattering all over the camera and obstructing the view and all that stuff. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything. Like I said, I'm only taking a couple thousandths maximum per pass here, so no real risk of hurting anything. But don't want to splash up my expensive camera with this stinky sulfury oil. I don't think electronics and lenses and things like that would enjoy that very much. Okay, now we're going to measure run out on the freshly machined surfaces. Now we are following the thread in, and you can see very minimal run out. And then we're going to check the face here. And remember, it was 4 thousandths to begin with, and now we're at a couple tenths. Now, this has also been single point machined, so under power, you know, that it's feeding out, so it's cutting essentially tiny little grooves in that face. Albeit they are flat and square, that's why the probe is, I mean, it's so sensitive, it's measuring that stuff, so that's all that is. And here we're showing the final product all cleaned up, removed from the jig. So very beautiful, cleaned up, shiny steel. And here's that recoil lug, a little bit better view of that. I think I mentioned, but this is made by Long Rifles Incorporated. They make a real nice Tikka T3x and T3 recoil lug aftermarket that I can install for you. So that's what it's going to look like when the barrel's smushed up and sandwiched in there. So, yeah, like I said, I think we will end it up here at 1 inch 40 thousandths for the new major diameter. And we're going to get some measurements on this lug. Should be right around 1/4 inch. Healthy 1/4 inch. 253.5. So yeah, it's a healthy 1/4 inch. 253.35. So just checking, make sure that thing's parallel. Okay, so here we go. These are cut for a standard thread. So what we're going to do is, yeah, we obviously got to make that bigger for the new barrel, for the new threads of the cleaned up receiver. So we'll get that in a jig and open up that internal diameter of that recoil lug. So here we go, just machining that out. Because since we're taking material out of the receiver, that makes the thread tenon larger. Which means everything's got to be a little bit bigger. But that's what we do. And just like the threads, I'm taking light passes here. 10. Yeah, it may have been a heavier cut there just to make most of it go away, but then go in there for a few finishing passes to account for any flex in the boring bar and stuff like that. This is pretty standard procedure for any recoil lug because they all have to be fit. Because one action or receiver may clean up a little bit a little sooner than the others. And here we are taking some measurements. So we got to measure the action in relation to the bolt because everything is now different. And I do this with any action at all, no matter, even if they give a print for the thread tenon, I'm always measuring it. Just to provide the closest fit possible, the least amount of slop, especially with headspace. You want to definitely make sure that that headspace is in safe zone, but also not too excessive. All right, here we are threading. And like I mentioned, that recoil lug has a little shelf to sit on. I didn't show any pre-machining of this, but I'm just checking the pitch there, so 16 threads per inch. And as far as I can recall, the major diameter was 1 inch, 40 thousandths. And so what I typically do is machine that recoil lug a little bit bigger than that. So we probably went like 1050 on the lug, just to give it a little extra meat to sit on. And then we do the rest of the tenon to what it's supposed to be. So I'm running that tool just a slight bit into where that recoil lug sits so that there's no binding when the receiver screws on. So the threads kind of disappear under there. But the lug still has plenty of material for it to sit on. And this is real time too. This has not been sped up. Running more around 330 probably on this. 4 to 5 thousandths in feed to start, and then I back it up as I get closer and closer to the final depth, double depth of the threads. A pretty standard threading operation here. I got an AR Warner stand-up threader there. Your typical 60-degree high-speed steel insert. I'm probably going to be moving to carbide here soon. I'm kind of getting tired of replacing these high-speed steel inserts. They wear off real quick because some reason they don't really like the 4140 or the 416 stainless that most of these barrels are. It just eats them up quick. If you don't catch it, you end up cutting threads. You gotta, obviously the tip wears off, so a lot of times I'll use like a worn one to start with and then use a fresh one to end with, just to make sure that valley is getting cut as deep as it should be. And carbide obviously doesn't have that issue unless you crash it and you chip it off. So I'm looking into some new threading tools here. Probably go with Shars just because they're affordable. I'm not doing production stuff here, so should be fine with that. But we'll see. We'll find out a little later in future videos, so stay tuned. Okay, let's see here. What are we going to do? We're going to try it. Yep, here we go. We're going to test fit this thing. Okay, so there we're starting on, but definitely too tight, so that's good. So we're going to advance the tool in probably half thousandths or so at a time until we get perfect fit. And put some of my secret blend of 11 herbs and spices of cutting oil that I got there. So take another pass, maybe two. So these are essentially pretty much cleanup passes here at the end. And so we'll just keep this up until that receiver screws on. Not too loose, not too tight. Just how we like it. Okay, going on a little farther. Still probably a little on the tight side. Definitely don't want tight threads. You don't want loose threads, obviously, but you want enough clearance in there so that when they torque, they torque only on the torque side of the thread. You know what I mean? The thread that's pulling together, you want those two faces to torque together, not bind. So if the thread's too tight, it'll kind of bind instead of torque properly. So you're torquing on the thread faces and the torque shoulders, most importantly. So if you got too tight of a thread, you're not torquing on the right place. So here I'm stopping the machine early so I can chase the thread all the way out. I want to make sure it's cutting all the way out to depth, because when it's running under power at 330 RPMs, it's easy to pull out a little too soon, a little prematurely. So I just want to make sure that last thread is cut as far to depth as possible, because again, we don't want anything binding here. We want a nice, beautiful, clean thread to specification. Don't want it binding on the front of the receiver and the back of the thread there. Okay, so now we've got that lug on, and we're going to check it. Keep checking. And that's looking like a real nice fit there. A one-handed turn on. Oops, okay, we're getting a little snug there, so looks like we're not done yet. Take that off and try it again. That's good. We just creep up on it. And you can see how nicely that recoil lug fit. Got to give it a little effort. Got to pull it straight back. It's not tight. It's just minimal clearance. So if you try to pull it off at a little bit of a wonky angle, it ain't going to go. And like I said, that recoil lug surface is a little bigger than the thread, so it's not binding on the threads whatsoever. I'll run a couple cleanup passes here. And you can see that tool's cutting on the left side of the thread like it's supposed to. Just getting that chip lift on the left side of the tool, which means it's following that 60-degree angle in off the compound like it should. See how far we get this time. You can see there's no jiggle in that. It's a nice straight thread, obviously straight, but definitely not loose. And yep, we are going all the way on right to that lug, and everything is torquing into place by hand beautifully. And I'm just trying to line it up so we can kind of get a little preview of what that's going to look like. So we're good there, but you can see an obvious problem. The shank of the barrel is a little bit big. So we're going to take care of that right now. Looks like we're starting at 1 1/4 inches, as per pretty much standard barrels. We're going to cut that down so that we don't have that ugly step there. I think we got to take it down to 1.180 if I remember correctly. So here we've centered it off the bore, and since we got so much sticking out there, we're supporting the mouth of the chamber area with a live center. And this is before we chamber anything, so I'm not smashing into a good finished chamber there. Don't you worry about that. I've just opened it up for a little bit more engagement on that live center to give it a little bit more support, which is going to equal just a nice surface finish. We don't want any chatter on this. You know, it's going to get Cerakoted later, but still, if we're going to avoid any chatter situations, we like to do that. And just like everything, we're not hogging off material here. Probably 20 thousandths, 25 thousandths per pass. Only taking off 130 something. Can't do math today. 100. Nope. Yep. 130 thousandths. 20, something like that. 120, 130. I'm a gunsmith, not a mathematician. Anyway, I'm gonna measure. Yeah, Tikka. Those fins are weird. I don't know why Why they didn't go to like 1.2? It's got to be 1.080, and it's not a metric size. It's freaking imperial, but for whatever reason. And now I'm doing a fancy reverse feed here. Just do some lathe tricks. Yeah, you can cut backwards too, kids. Look at that. I think I just did that because I can. Impress the ladies. Oh, now we're going forward. Look at that. So my lathe has a quick reverse. Feed reverse. It's pretty sweet. I love that feature, so I'm using it. And looks like I got real close to the estimated stick out there, but I believe everything worked out fine without having to re-chuck it. Yep, oof, look at that. Super close, but should be good. This barrel, yeah, forgive me, I may be wrong here. I'll edit this if it's wrong, but I believe it's a Bartlein, as some people like to mispronounce it. Okay, let's check that, and feeling for a little step there. Anyway, there's the finished product torqued in. And as you can see, that's a real nice transition there. Looks way better. And now since we got that new lug, we got to modify the stock for the lug because, as we all know, Tikka stocks do not have a cutout for those. You can see the original lug is still in place. We're using that as a reference. I didn't show it, but basically use that as a reference so we could offset the milling cutter there to cut the proper dimension ahead of it. And since that lug is there, I'm just basically cutting quite a bit out because we're going to bed this thing. And we're using the original lug for alignment, and then the bedding will fill in the lug, all surfaces, front, back, sides. And now we're opening up the barrel channel because that new barrel was quite a bit larger than the factory puny little silly original one was. Yeah, it's going in there and opening up that barrel channel. As you can see, that stock has plenty of material there to work with. We could put in probably an MTU in this thing without too much trouble. All right, there we go. There's the pocket for the new lug. There is the stock. We cut out a lot of material for the bedding to fill because we don't want it chipping out. We want a nice thick layer of bedding in there. And there's the finished product. I didn't get any footage of the bedding procedure, but there it is, done. And you can see we took out the original factory lug, but it filled in the recess on the receiver bottom. And then there's the rear of it. I still got to drill out the holes. You can see threads in there. I'm going to drill that out. I clear out all that stuff. But there's a nice bedding bed. Little And then the barrel shank, we do a little bit ahead of that because of the head. When we use heavy barrels, we'll use fill in the bedding there for a little support. And there's pillars in there too. And here's my lovely wife, Crystal, doing a fine Cerakote job. So he just wanted it armor black. Pretty sure this is armor black. It's black. Could be graphite. So anyway, she does a real nice job with the Cerakote. Always turns out looking pro because it is pro. But we Cerakoted the barreled action, as you're seeing it there, plus the bolt handle. And here is our 60-watt MOPA fiber laser, JPT. Engraving our logo into the shank there, real nice like. Thing does an excellent job. And here is the finished product. I made him a custom thread protector, so 5/8 24 threads there on the muzzle. Fluted barrel, nicely lined up. I'm sorry I didn't get much of that barrel footage in there, but we had that barrel fluted. And so yeah, there's the Cerakote, the shroud, the handle, the knob. The stock is what came with it. I don't know the brand. I don't know if it's a Tikka, but our customer supplied that, and there was no maker's mark on that at all. And here we got the 24-inch finished barrel, chambered in 280 Ackley Improved. And this thing shot real well off my testing, just the bench testing that I do before I ship them back. This guy's from Louisiana. He works out in the oil rigs, out in the ocean. It's pretty cool. So we got a 1-in-9 twist barrel there, 280 Ackley Improved, with finished, beautifully Cerakoted, on display on our porch here in Casper, Wyoming. And there's the group. That is a 10-shot group, believe it or not. So, well under 1 MOA. Some of those shots, the brand new barrel, so we're breaking it in and we're using factory ammo and stuff like that. So, anyway, thank you very much for watching. And please like, comment, and subscribe. And see you on the next one.